What happens when Hollywood royalty walks onto a late-night set expecting the red carpet treatment, but instead gets asked the questions everyone's been dying to hear answered? In just 36 seconds, one comment would turn a routine interview into the most shocking moment in late-night television history. Jimmy Kimmel sat behind his desk that night like he always did, ready to welcome another guest onto his show. The audience buzzed with excitement. They knew who was coming out next. The cameras were rolling. Everything seemed normal, but what nobody in that studio knew was that they were about to witness something that would leave everyone speechless. The band played, the crowd cheered, and out walked Meghan Markle, smiling and waving like she owned the place. She wore a dress that probably cost more than most people make in a year. Her hair was perfect. Her makeup was flawless. She walked with the kind of confidence that made it clear she thought this interview would go exactly how she wanted it to go. Jimmy stood up to greet her. He shook her hand. He smiled. They both sat down. The audience settled into their seats. And then Jimmy did what he always does. He started with a simple question. So, thanks for being here tonight. I have to ask, there's been a lot of talk lately about some of the comments you've made in other interviews. Do you stand by everything you've said? It was a fair question. A normal question. The kind of question any good host would ask. But the look on Meghan's face changed immediately. Her smile disappeared. Her eyes narrowed. She shifted in her seat. I'm sorry, what exactly are you referring to? She asked, her voice sharp. Jimmy kept his cool. He smiled. He stayed professional. Well, there have been some statements that people have questioned. I think the audience would love to hear your perspective on them. Meghan let out a laugh, but it wasn't a real laugh. It was the kind of laugh someone makes when they're not actually amused at all. Oh, I see what this is, she said. You brought me here under the pretense of a friendly conversation, and now you're trying to ambush me with gotcha questions. The audience went quiet. You could feel the tension building. Jimmy leaned forward slightly. His expression stayed calm, but you could tell he wasn't backing down. I don't think asking about things you've publicly said is an ambush, he replied. This is what we do here. We have conversations. We ask questions. That's kind of the whole point of a talk show. Meghan crossed her arms. Her whole body language screamed defensiveness. You know what, Jimmy? I think you're intimidated by strong women who speak their minds. That's what this is really about, isn't it? The audience gasped. A few people whispered to each other. Jimmy's face showed a flicker of surprise, but he recovered quickly. That's quite an accusation, he said calmly. I've had hundreds of strong women on this show. I've never had a problem having honest conversations with any of them. I'm just trying to understand your perspective. My perspective, Meghan said, her voice getting louder. My perspective is that I came here expecting respect, and instead I'm being treated like I'm on trial. Jimmy shook his head slowly. Nobody's putting you on trial, but when you make claims in public, people are going to ask about them. That's just how it works. That's how it works for you, maybe, Meghan shot back. But I don't have to sit here and be interrogated by someone who clearly has an agenda. The audience was completely silent now. Every eye in the room was locked on the stage. Jimmy took a breath. He looked directly at her. I don't have an agenda. I have questions that my audience wants answers to. If you don't want to answer them, that's your choice. But don't accuse me of something I'm not doing. Meghan stood up suddenly. The movement was so abrupt that it startled everyone. She pointed a finger at Jimmy. You know what your problem is. You think because you have this platform, you can say whatever you want to, whoever you want. Well, I have a platform too, and I don't need to sit here and listen to this. Jimmy remained seated. His voice stayed level, controlled. You're absolutely right. You don't have to sit here. But before you go, I think the audience deserves to know why you're so upset about being asked to explain your own words. That did it. Meghan's face flushed red. her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "How dare you?" she said, her voice shaking with anger. "How dare you sit there and act like you're some kind of noble journalist when all you do is make jokes and mock people for entertainment?" "I do make jokes," Jimmy said, still remarkably calm. "That's my job. But I also have real conversations with people. And right now, I'm trying to have one with you. You're the one who's turning this into something else." Meghan looked around at the audience. Some people looked uncomfortable. Others looked shocked. A few looked like they couldn't believe what they were seeing. "You people," she said, addressing the crowd now. "You sit there and you eat this up, don't you? You love watching people get torn down. It makes you feel better about your own lives." The audience stirred. A few people looked offended. Jimmy stood up now, his expression serious. "Hey, hold on," he said firmly. "Don't talk to them like that. They came here to have a good time. They didn't do anything to you." "Oh, now you're defending them?" Meghan said mockingly. "How noble of you, Jimmy. What a hero you are." "I'm not trying to be a hero," Jimmy replied. "I'm just trying to do my job. And part of that job is making sure my guests treat people with respect. That includes my audience." Meghan laughed again, that same bitter, fake laugh. "Respect? You want to talk to me about respect? That's rich coming from someone who makes a living mocking people on television every single night." "There's a difference between comedy and cruelty," Jimmy said. "And right now, you're being cruel to people who did nothing to deserve it." Meghan grabbed her purse from beside the chair. She slung it over her shoulder with an exaggerated motion. "I don't have to listen to this. I don't have to be here. You can keep your little show and your little audience. I have better things to do with my time." Jimmy spread his hands out in a gesture of disbelief. "Then why did you come here in the first place? What did you think was going to happen?" "I thought I was going to have a civilized conversation," Meghan snapped. "I thought I was going to be treated like an adult. But clearly, that was too much to expect from you." "A civilized conversation goes both ways," Jimmy countered. "You can't just expect to say whatever you want without anyone ever questioning it. That's not how the real world works." Meghan took a step toward the edge of the stage. The cameras followed her movement. Everyone in the studio was frozen, watching this unfold. "The real world?" she said, spinning back around to face him. "You want to talk about the real world? You sit in your comfortable studio with your comfortable life, and you judge everyone else. You have no idea what it's like to be constantly scrutinized, constantly questioned, constantly doubted." Jimmy's expression softened slightly, but his voice remained steady. "You're right. I don't know exactly what your experience is like, but that doesn't mean you get to come on here and attack me for doing my job. I've been nothing but respectful to you since you walked out here." "Respectful?" Meghan's voice went up an octave. "You call this respectful? Ambushing me with hostile questions and then acting like I'm the problem when I defend myself?" "I asked you one question," Jimmy said, holding up one finger. "One question about things you've said publicly. That's it. Everything that happened after that was your choice." The audience murmured in agreement. A few people even started to clap, but they stopped quickly when Meghan whipped around to glare at them. "Of course you'd take his side," she said to the crowd. "You're his audience. You worship him. You'd believe anything he says." "That's not fair," someone from the audience called out. Meghan's eyes widened in outrage. "Excuse me? Did someone just speak to me?" Jimmy moved around his desk now, positioning himself between Meghan and the audience. "Okay, that's enough," he said, his tone firm but not aggressive. "You need to stop. You're upset. I get it. But you don't get to talk to people like this. Not here." "Don't tell me what I can and can't do," Meghan said, pointing at him again. "You're not my father. You're not my boss. You're nobody to me." "You're right," Jimmy agreed. "I'm nobody to you. But this is my show. These are my guests in the audience. And I'm not going to stand here and watch you insult them because you didn't, like a question I asked." Meghan's jaw dropped. She looked genuinely shocked that someone was standing up to her. "I cannot believe this," she said, her voice dripping with indignation. "I cannot believe you're speaking to me this way." "How am I speaking to you?" Jimmy asked, spreading his arms. "I'm being honest. I'm being direct. Isn't that what you wanted? A real conversation?" "A real conversation doesn't involve being attacked," Meghan shot back. "Nobody attacked you." Jimmy's voice rose slightly for the first time. "I asked you a question. One question. And you completely overreacted. That's on you, not me." Meghan's face was bright red now. She looked around the studio like she was searching for support, but everyone just stared back at her in silence. "This is unbelievable," she muttered. "This is absolutely unbelievable." "What's unbelievable," Jimmy said, "is that you came on a talk show and expected to never be asked about anything you've said or done. That's not how this works. That's never been how this works." "I've done dozens of interviews," Meghan said defensively. "I've been on countless shows, and I've never been treated like this." "Maybe that's because everyone else was too scared to ask you real questions," Jimmy replied. "Maybe everyone else just let you say whatever you wanted without any pushback. But that's not what we do here." Meghan shook her head slowly, a bitter smile on her face. "You're going to regret this, Jimmy. You have no idea who you're dealing with." Jimmy actually laughed at that. It was a genuine laugh, not mean-spirited, but amused. "Is that a threat? Are you actually threatening me right now on live television?" "It's not a threat," Meghan said quickly. "It's a fact. People are going to hear about this. They're going to know how you treated me." "Good," Jimmy said simply. "I hope they do. Because they're going to see exactly what happened here. They're going to see that I asked you a fair question, and you lost your mind." "I did not lose my mind," Meghan shouted. "You're shouting at me right now," Jimmy pointed out calmly. That seemed to snap something in Meghan. She took a deep breath, smoothed down her dress, and tried to compose herself. But her hands were shaking. Her voice was still trembling when she spoke. "I'm leaving now," she announced. "And trust me, you haven't heard the last of this." "You're absolutely free to leave," Jimmy said. "The door's right there. But before you go, I just want to say one more thing." Meghan stopped and turned back to him, her expression wary. "What?" "I'm sorry if I upset you," Jimmy said sincerely. "That genuinely wasn't my intention. I just wanted to have a conversation. A real one. Maybe that was too much to ask." For a moment, just a brief moment, Meghan's expression softened. It looked like she might actually calm down, might actually respond like a reasonable person. But then she shook her head, and the anger came flooding back. "You're not sorry," she said coldly. "Don't pretend to be sorry. You got exactly what you wanted. You wanted drama, and you got it. I hope you're proud of yourself." "I didn't want drama," Jimmy insisted. "I wanted honesty. There's a difference." "Well, here's some honesty for you," Meghan said, her voice low and dangerous. "You're a small, insecure little man who uses comedy to hide the fact that you have nothing meaningful to say. And this show is a joke. You're a joke." The audience gasped collectively. Jimmy's face remained neutral, but you could see the hurt flash across his eyes for just a second. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but firm. "If that's how you feel, then I'm glad you're leaving. Because I don't need someone who thinks that little of me on my stage." Meghan turned on her heel and started walking toward the stage exit, but she couldn't help herself. She turned back one more time. "You know what the saddest part is?" she called out. "You actually think you're one of the good guys. You think you're different from all the other hosts out there. But you're not. You're exactly the same. You're worse, actually, because at least they're honest about what they are." Jimmy didn't respond to that. He just stood there, watching her go. The audience sat in stunned silence. Nobody knew what to say. Nobody knew what to do. And another thing, Meghan continued, apparently not done yet. The fact that you have the audacity to lecture me about respect when you make your living tearing other people down is the height of hypocrisy. Do you know how many people you've hurt with your jokes? Do you know how many lives you've affected? If I've hurt anyone with my comedy, I genuinely apologize, Jimmy said quietly. That's never my intention. But there's still a difference between a joke and what you're doing right now. What am I doing right now? Meghan demanded. You're lashing out because someone asked you a question you didn't want to answer, Jimmy said simply. You're attacking everyone in this room because you feel attacked. But nobody attacked you. I asked you to explain something you said. That's it. That's all I did. Meghan's mouth opened and closed several times, like she was trying to find the words to respond, but couldn't. Finally, she just shook her head. I don't have to explain myself to you or anyone else, she said. I don't owe you anything. You're absolutely right, Jimmy agreed. You don't owe me anything, but you do owe it to yourself to think about why a simple question made you react this way. That was apparently the final straw. Meghan let out a sound that was half laugh, half scream. Oh, now you're my therapist? Now you're going to psychoanalyze me? That's perfect. That's just perfect. She stormed off the stage, her heels clicking loudly on the floor. But even as she reached the exit, she couldn't resist turning back one last time. You're going to regret this, Jimmy Kimmel. Mark my words. You're going to regret the day you decided to go after me. And with that, she was gone. The door slammed behind her with a bang that echoed through the silent studio. For a long moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every second of the stunned aftermath. Jimmy stood alone on the stage, looking at the empty chair where his guest had been sitting just minutes before. He ran a hand through his hair, let out a long breath, and turned back to face the audience. Their faces showed a mix of shock, confusion, and disbelief. Well, Jimmy finally said, his voice cutting through the silence. That happened. A few nervous laughs rippled through the crowd. Jimmy walked back to his desk and sat down heavily in his chair. He looked directly at the camera. I honestly don't know what to say right now, he admitted. I've been doing this job for a long time, and I've never had anything like that happen before. The audience started to clap. It began with just a few people, but then more joined in, and soon the entire studio was applauding. Jimmy held up his hands, trying to stop them. No, don't do that, he said. This isn't something to applaud. This was unfortunate. This was really unfortunate. But the applause continued. It grew louder. People started to stand up. Jimmy looked genuinely uncomfortable with the reaction. Please sit down, he said. Seriously, everyone sit down. The audience eventually quieted and returned to their seats. Jimmy took a sip of water from the mug on his desk. His hands were steady, but you could tell he was processing what had just happened. Look, he said, leaning forward. I know that was uncomfortable to watch. It was uncomfortable to be a part of. But I want to be clear about something. I didn't bring her on this show to embarrass her. I didn't want that to happen. I genuinely just wanted to have a conversation. He paused, gathering his thoughts. And when someone comes on this show, I'm going to ask them questions. That's what I do. That's what any interviewer does. If those questions make someone uncomfortable, I'm sorry. But that doesn't mean they're unfair questions. The audience murmured in agreement. Jimmy nodded. I've had people on this show who've been asked tough questions before. Politicians, celebrities, authors, everyone. And you know what? Most of them handle it like adults. They answer the questions, or they politely decline to answer, or they explain why they don't want to talk about something. That's normal. That's professional. He gestured toward the empty chair. That That was not normal. That was not professional. And I think everyone here saw that. More applause. Jimmy didn't try to stop it this time. He just waited for it to die down naturally. The thing is, he continued, I actually feel bad for her. I do. Because whatever is going on in her life that made her react that way, it's clearly something she's struggling with. And I hope she gets help with that. I genuinely do. He took another sip of water. But I also can't just let what happened slide. She insulted me. She insulted this show. And worst of all, she insulted all of you. And that's not okay. You guys didn't do anything wrong. You were just here to have a good time. And you got dragged into something that had nothing to do with you. A woman in the front row called out, "We love you, Jimmy." He smiled at that. A real smile this time. "I love you guys too," he said, "and I appreciate your support. I really do. But more than that, I appreciate that you saw what actually happened here. You saw that I was respectful. You saw that I was professional. And you saw how things escalated through no fault of mine." He stood up from his desk again and walked to the front of the stage. "I'm not going to spend the rest of this show talking about what just happened. That's not what we're about here. We're about having fun, making people laugh, and occasionally having meaningful conversations with interesting people. And that's what we're going to continue to do." The audience cheered. Jimmy clapped his hands together. "So, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to have some actual fun. We've got a great musical guest lined up, and I promise you, they're not going to storm off the stage." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Jimmy grinned. "At least, I don't think they will. Although after tonight, who knows? Maybe everyone's going to start storming off. Maybe that's the new thing now." More laughter. The tension in the room was finally starting to ease. Jimmy pointed at the camera. "We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere." The cameras cut away for the commercial break. But even as the red lights went off, people in the audience were buzzing with excitement and disbelief. They pulled out their phones, probably ready to text everyone they knew about what they'd just witnessed. The crew members on the side of the stage were talking in hushed, animated voices. Jimmy walked over to his producer, who had rushed onto the stage during the break. They spoke quietly for a moment, their expressions serious. The producer gestured emphatically, clearly concerned about what had just transpired. Jimmy nodded, said something that seemed to calm the producer down, and then turned back to face the audience. "How's everyone doing?" he asked casually, as if nothing unusual had happened. The audience responded with cheers and applause. Several people gave him thumbs up. One man shouted, "You handled that perfectly." Jimmy shrugged modestly. "I just tried to be reasonable," he said. "That's all anyone can do, right? You try to be reasonable, you try to be fair, and you hope the other person does the same. Sometimes it works out. Sometimes..." He trailed off, gesturing at the empty chair with a wry smile. People laughed. It was good to hear. Laughter again after the intensity of what had just happened. Jimmy checked his watch. "All right, we've got about 30 seconds before we're back. Everyone ready to have some actual fun now?" The audience cheered enthusiastically. Jimmy returned to his desk, straightened his tie, and took a deep breath. The cameras would be rolling again any second. The show would go on, because that's what the show always did. But everyone there knew they'd just witnessed something extraordinary, something that would be talked about for days, weeks, maybe even years to come. The night a guest walked onto Jimmy Kimmel's show, expecting to be treated like royalty, and instead discovered that even celebrities have to answer questions. The night someone thought they were above being held accountable for their own words. The night that proved what happens when entitlement meets reality on live television. The producer counted down with his fingers. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The cameras came back on. Jimmy smiled at the audience, at the millions of people watching at home. And he did what he always did. He moved forward. He kept going. Because that's what professionals do. even after the most bizarre and uncomfortable interview of their entire career.